Okay, okay. Another one is Susu and someone else. Yes, okay. Everyone is here now. So please start your presentation.
Yes. Good evening, Professor Hsia, Professor Ned, and also all my friends. This evening, I would like to discuss and sharing about the one topic that we call by the name factor affecting digestibility of the feed. So I choose this topic. I hope I can uh, more understand about what kind of factor that affecting the digestibility of the feed, particularly for the ruminant. So for the introduction, we would like to start by the digestibility itself. It is the factor that expresses the potential of an ingredient to be digested, absorbed, and processed by the animals, whether in terms of the nutrient or energy. The digestibility is important in interpreting the quality of ingested nutrient. In practice, it represents the difference between the amount of feed ingested and amount of feces produced. However, low digestibility in animal nutrition can cause animal to lose weight and display nutrition deficiency. So just going on to the digestibility of the feed, I noticed at least there are 7 factors that contributed on the digestibility of feed, starting from the quantity of feed, feeding frequency, particle size, nutrient content, processing of food, age of animal, and the environment itself. And the next, we will discuss one by one of its subtopic. So for the feeding quantity, according to this research, we will notice that this experiment try to identify the average digestibility of organic matter and crude fiber from the sheep. So this experiment use two type of diet, which is ratio one for the one comparing one, which is hay and then the concentrate, and another one is 1 part of the concentrate and 4 part for the I'm sorry, 1 part for the hay and the 4 part for the concentrate. And if you look at for the daily feed intake here, starting from the 600 until 1,400 gram, we will notice related to the digestibility is tend to decrease, which means seems like the increasing the food intake here, it will affect on the reducing the digestibility of the feed, whether in form of organic matter and also crude fiber. Then if we coming to the next slide, still on the same experiment, they try to identify using a different level of feeding for the digestibility. So in this case, they use a maintenance and then ad libitum feeding level. If try to connecting with the digestibility here, also same with the previous one, we will notice that the low feed intake, which means is for the maintenance, it will affect better or higher digestibility compared with ad libitum. And in the next step, if we look at for the dry cow and lactating cows here, they provide the ad libitum diet here. So we will find also they have a different apparent digestibility. As we can see for the dry cows, the digestibility is higher compared with the lactating cows. So I think another information that we can get from here is beside the feeding level, So we have to say, maybe we have to say that the physiological status of the animal also will affect on the digestibility if we look at from the dry cow and the lactating cows. So a low feed intake resulted in a more efficient mastication and a decreased passage rate of digesta through gastrointestinal tract, which ultimately increased the dietary digestibility. And related to this statement, we can see from this picture that there is a relation between feed intake, turnover rate liquid, and the digesta. From this picture, we can see that if the dry matter intake is low, then the turnover rate and also the fiber turnover rate will linearly decrease. However, in other situations, if the dry matter intake, both fiber turnover and the liquid turnover will be increased. The second part that we mentioned about the feeding frequency, as it has another effect on the feed efficiency. From this experiment, they try to identify the effect of the feeding frequency and excluding corn on the intake and the digestibility. But related to the feed efficiency, from this table, it's very clearly identified that the feeding frequency 4 times get much better in the intake of NDF. And also, if we try to connecting with the apparent digestibility in total tract here, we find also whether in form of EC is the extruded corn and GC is the grown corn, they found that the digestibility from the more frequent feeding, which is 4 times, is more higher compared with the only 2 times feeding. Then, if we try to connecting feeding with the efficiency, also we will find that those feeding frequency also have effect on the pH of the rumen. So in this case, we will find that by providing more frequent feeding to the diet to the animals, seems like the pH of the rumen tend to decrease compared with only 2 times. And another thing is the CV here. CV is meaning as variation between the pH. Another positive effect, maybe in the previous in the pH we can say that it seems like it's have a negative effect because tend to decrease the pH. But another positive effect is the variation of the pH from the more frequent feeding is less compared with only 2 times feeding treatment. And this is another experiment that also related with the feeding frequency and then digestibility. But this here more focused on the pH. As we can see here, by providing more frequent feeding starting from 2 until 16 times, we related to the pH is we will get the result is the hours below pH 6.7, which means the hours pH in the rumen that has score less than 6.7 is more longer if we provide the more frequent of the feeding. So this is maybe can be as a little bit negative effect by providing the more frequent of feedings, because the pH is less than the 6.7 more longer. However, in this slide, so that another positive effect, I think, because this experiment show about the effect of the feeding frequency on abomasal nitrogen and the efficiency of the microbial crude protein. So what we can get from this picture is by providing a more frequent feeding frequency, yes, the pH will be low if we compare with the previous slide, but the microbial N and the efficiency of the microbial crude protein, it seems like tends to much better compared with only 2 times feeding in this case. So another positive effect by the providing more frequent feeding is the microbial and then microbial crude protein is synthesis is much more higher. And this is maybe because the activity of the microbe from the frequent of feeding that they give to the animals. And then in the different experiment, but in the more advanced, I mean the more recent years, they also in the same things, providing the feeding frequency and extrusion corn in the intake of the crude protein in phases of digesta, we will find the microbial crude protein from the more frequent feeding, which is 4 times here, whether in form of the EC is extruded corn or the GC is the grown corn, we will find that microbial efficiency is tend to be higher compared with the only 2 times. And of course, it's also effect on the EDTT, this means the apparent digestibility of the total tract. Then this experiment also identified the feeding frequency, however, starting from the first and only 1 feeding frequency until 4 times feeding frequency. But according to this experiment related to the digestibility, we will notice that the 1 and twice feeding frequency seems doesn't have any significant effect related to digestibility, but if we provide that at least 3 times here, then the digestibility so much better compared with only 2 times. So 3 times is get a more better rather than 2. Another explanation is due to the smaller meal size, the number of the ruminal microorganism may have been increased. Therefore, a larger distribution area for feed degradation was present. All of this leading to an increase in digestibility of NDF and thereby positively influencing the total digestible nutrient value. At the feeding frequency 1 or 2 times per day, the lamb that had decreased amount and NDF may have degraded. This may have occurred by having a smaller number of microorganisms for a greater accumulation of fiber, which lead to the lower digestibility of this nutrient. And then another part that we want to discuss about the particle size. So according to this experiment, the particle size that has also effect on the digestibility. We can see from this experiment, they try to identify the different size of the hay, which is chopper in the different size, 3 until 4 centimeter, and compare with the very ground, only 2 millimeter. So according to this reference, they provide the dry matter, crude protein, ADF, and NDF stems so much more better if they provide a little bit a bigger size, which is 3 until 4 centimeters. And also another experiment by long and short hay, we can find here that the digestibility from the long hay also show higher digestibility compared with the short one. The reason from those kind of the experiment, one of is related with the presence of the chopper hay in the diet was associated with an improved rumen environment, which will ultimately lead to an overall improvement of the digestibility. However, it could also be possible that the concentrate and the chopper hay, it will increase the retention time and will improve the apparent digestibility. The fourth one is the nutrient content. As we know that the nutrient content also one of the main factors that contributing the digestibility. For the forage, as example, by providing different type of the source of the forage and different time of the harvesting in the maturity stage, it will affect on the nutrient content. It has almost the forage also limitation from the forage is mostly come from the lignin content. If the high lignin content, then it has a possible to reduce the digestibility. And of course, more mature, it will reduce the nutrient content like the crude protein content in this case. And also another particle, another feedstuff like from the grain here, as we can see here that the corn, barley, oat, milo, and wheat that has a different variety of the dry matter content and also the percentage of the total digestible nutrient. The number 5 is talking about the processing food. In this case, this is a review from the Huntington that he reviewed from the several researcher, and we can notice that there is different type of processing from the grain, especially in this case, like the DR is this dry roll, and then steam flake, and then high moisture, ground, and steam roll. So those kind of processing from the grain will affect on the digestibility of rumen and the post-rumen. So in this case, we will notice that almost from those kind of the digestibility from the diet mostly digested in the rumen, and some of them is in the post-rumen in this case, in the small amount, but around some reference say about 5 to 20%. But in this case, we will find this reference until 45% in this case. But I'm not really sure about what the reason in this case, why very high in this post-rumen here. But the reason from the whole processing for the feed, they say that the whole grain with an intact pericarp is largely or entirely resistant to digestion by ruminant because whole kernel are resistant to bacterial attachment. So conversely, grain is processed by application of various combination of heat, moisture, time, and mechanical action. This processing treatment increases digestibility of the starch by providing opportunity for bacterial attachment to the starch granule. So in this case, the pericarp is the part of the resistant to digestion by the ruminant. So related to the pericarp itself, if we look at here, the structure of the kernel, I just want to notice that the pericarp that make it difficult to be digested directly because at least from this picture, he has a several layer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So she has it has 5 layers of the brain pericarp. So maybe it's this part that make it difficult to be digest directly by the rumen, if not through processing. And related to this processing, also this experiment identified how is the digestibility from the several type of the diet, which is in form of maize. This is M. This is the sorghum stover base diet in maize form. So sorghum stover, M is maize, and C is chopped, and M here is maize again, and P here, the last P is pellet. So related to the four type of the diet here, we will notice that digestibility from the pellets is better rather than in the maize or in the chopper. So the possibility reason for this is the pellet itself may attribute to the increasing the first palatability and then acceptability in form of the pellet diet. Improved dry matter and organic matter digestibility of the pellet diet may be due to that the heat processing cause gelatinization of starch and exposed to the high crystalline or physically inaccessible starch and trapped in the cellular matrix or enzymatic or microbial digestion. It would seem that the use of shear force by an expander would allow the increased nutrient to be accessible with were previous bound within cellular material. In addition, during the extrusion process, fiber content and composition in high fiber formulation, soluble fiber increased by approximately 3% and carbohydrate content increased by 4 until 5%. And then number 6 is for the age of the animal. But in this case, the age of animal is related to the weaning age. So according to this experiment, seems like the weaning age will affect on the digestibility. What we want to say, if you look at this table, is they try to identify average digestibility from the several group of calf, several calf weaning period, which is 4 week, 6 week, 8 weeks, and 10 weeks. And they try to identify digestibility from different group this in the 12 week and then in the 21 weeks. Then they found the result is in the 12 week, there is no difference between the weaning of egg weaning egg on the digestibility, but if they identify on the 21 weeks, seems like by weaning more earlier, it's mean in 4 and 6 week they have a better digestibility compared with the weaning in the old period, 8 until 10 weeks. So in this case, we will notice that the weaning egg also will affect on the digestibility. So in the second measurement, higher digestibility of dry matter and organic matter of calf in group 4 and 6 week maybe is compensatory for reaction of the nutrient caused by the early weaning. And then the last one is for the environment. So this experiment try to identify whether the high temperature, and then the H is high temperature, and then T is the thermoneutral environment with the free feeding, and then the TR is thermoneutral with the restricted feeding. So we will find that in the high temperatures, the digestibility is higher rather than in the thermoneutral, or whether compared with thermoneutral with the restricted feeding. And then the last slide also mentioned the same thing, that the summer and then winter, but this animal is in the yaks. We will find and notice that the digestibility in the summer, in this case, is higher rather than in the winter. Even the dry matter intake in the summer is less. So for my conclusion, I want to say, I'm sorry, for the conclusion, maybe we can say that the digestibility of diet in the rumen are determined by the interrelation among several factors, including source of the diet composition, amount of feed consumed per unit time, feeding frequency, feed processing, nutrient content, and the degree of adaptation of ruminal microbiota to the diet. Thank you for the listening my presentation this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have a comment, suggestion, or question? Chat. Sorry, chat.
Okay, thank you, Professor, and thank you, Aswah, for your presentation. I have two questions. One is about late weaning. You said decrease the apparent digestibility, right? Early weaning and the late weaning.
Yes.
So can you explain why the late weaning decrease the digestibility of nutrient?
Okay. So, Chad, I think related to this case is the late weaning. In this case, in the 20 week, the digestibility is the less than the 12 week. There is two possibility. The first is if we provide the early weaning in this case, 4 until 6 week, compared with 8 and 10, 4 until 6, which means we will stimulate the the rumen with the more fiber and then the grain, right? And those kind of the feed which is from the fiber and grain will stimulate the papilla of the rumen. Then in the next coming period, in the 21 weeks, because the the stimulation from the diet, so it can digest. It has a higher digestibility. But in 8 until 10, because we stimulate late, we late to stimulate the size and the maturity of the rumen, then the digestibility is less.
Can we also say the young early weaning the lamb, they are more used to this kind of feeds rather than older weaning lambs, calves?
Yes.
Can we say like this way? Because
yes,
if they are weaning early, their lumen is more used to this kind of microbial digestion. If you early weaning late, they are not used to this kind of lumen digestion. Can we say that?
Yes, Professor.
Am I right?
Yes, Professor.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
Professor.
No reaction at all. What kind of things happen?
夏博有戴耳机吗？
我有戴耳机啊。
因为我们都有听到声音。
现在就你在画面上，它的画面是完全静止的。
还是网络的问题吗？
出了什么状况？
Aswah, can you say something?
Hello, everyone.
他说了，但是没有声音啊。
可是我这边有听到哎。
其他所有人的画面都不见了，是不是出了什么问题
Nate, can you say something?
Yes.
夏博有听到 Nate 的声音吗
？Can you hear what we are
Yes.
talking about?
Yes. Good evening.
Because I cannot see many people. Especially I cannot hear Aswah saying. Can you hear Aswah saying?
Yes.
How about now,
I mean,
Dr.
no,
Shah, Professor?
Not before. Or yes, now I can see.
Okay, no. Yes.
Aswah, can you say something?
Yes, Professor. I agree with your comment before that the early weaning will make the rumen used to this kind of the microbial development from the diet.
Okay. Do you agree?
Yes, of course. But in this table, if we see the dry matter and the like organic matter, crude protein, ether extract, calcium, and phosphorus.
I cannot hear you.
Oh,
Broken.
can you see the ether extract apparent digestibility? Apparent digestibility of ether extract. It's increased in the late weaning. Only ether extract. Can you see?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. But seems like this not if we look at the free value, seems like not significant yet.
Yeah, it's not significant.
Yes.
And my another question is in I think slide 5 about lactating cow has lower apparent digestibility than the dry cow. Why the?
Oh, here.
Yes.
Okay.
I cannot hear very clearly from chat. Sorry.
Okay. My question was why
I'm not quite sure
lactating.
what happened in the Wi-Fi.
Can you hear me now, Professor?
I can hear, but
Okay.
still have a little bit of broken. I'm not quite sure whether the
Okay,
other people can hear.
Okay, I
Yes, we,
repeat.
we can hear Shed very clear.
Okay. I repeat my question
Okay.
again. My question was why the
Mhm.
lactating cow has lower apparent digestibility than the dry cows.
Oh, okay. If we look at the dry cow and the lactating cow, we know that the digestibility is less for the lactating cows. And whereas if we look at the intake here is higher, right? So maybe I will predict that decreasing the dry matter intake, increasing or higher the digestibility in dry cow here is because the intake of the dry cow itself is less compared with the lactating jet. So we can say that here is the digestibility dry cow is higher from the lactating because the feed intake from the dry cow itself is less compared with the lactating. Then in any situation, if animal has a low feed intake because they provide the ad libitum and the sesa, of course they will have a higher feed intake. Higher the digestibility here. And because we compare with the dry cows, dry cow here is a less feed intake compared with the lactating, then the digestibility is higher in the dry cow. I'm thinking like that way.
Yes. I'm totally agree with this kind of saying because this is not only happen in the cow and the sheep, but also happen in the pigs and the chicken. If you eat more, your digestibility, your feed efficiency will be lower. If you eat less, your feed efficiency and digestibility will be higher. Even true in the pigs and the chickens.
But from here, what something related with the metabolism rate or not from this figure?
I'm not sure, Ned, whether it has the related with the metabolism, but I'm thinking that if we look at the ad libitum, maybe Professor will correct my statement. They provide the same ad libitum feeding, but the feed intake is different, right? So I guess this case because the dry cows, the size of the rumen is, can we say, is a little bit depressed by the size of the fetus. Then even we provide the ad libitum, so she cannot eat much because this capacity is already pressed by the fetus. Then the feed intake is less in this case, and it affect on the
Very
digestibility.
simple. I think both of you say is right, but can we say very simply, usually dry sow, you will not allow them to eat more. If they eat more, they will get in trouble. The dry period, usually we will limit their feeding. So once you limit their feeding, they eat less, of course, compared with lactation sow, like lactation cows. You know, so maybe next step is because the body weight, metabolic body weight. I agree with that. In this case, eat less anyway. If they doing this experiment, they should be considered about the body weight is roughly the same. That's my guess. Anyway, in the chip, you can also see the maintenance symptom is lower digestibility. That is also related with food intake. 为什么我的网络连线断了？
我觉得
我这边网络连线
比
断了。哦，好，又回来了。
Chef, we can hear you what you say.
Because just before my Wi-Fi is broken. Okay. Any other question? Chad, are you satisfied this kind of discussion?
Yes, yes.
Don't just say yes, because sometimes if you don't agree, you can say what kind of things you do not agree. Then we can have more useful discussion. Anything? My goodness. Must be something wrong. I don't know which thing's wrong. Yolita, do you have? Okay.
New raised hand, right?
Yes, right.
Yes, Professor.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Professor and Aswah. My question is in page 9. Yes, in here, could you explain the CV percent again? It is the pH, right? In rumen CV percent that you, yeah.
Yes.
So in here is it's like if we provide the feed for 4 times, it will decrease the pH in here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, both of the type of the feed. So I would like to know about the reason why it's 2 different pH in here if we provide 2 times and 4 times. Thank you.
Related to the pH in this case, this is mean and this is the CV. Mean is means the value of the pH itself from different frequency feeding 2 and 4 times. And the CV here mean is the variation during the feeding frequency that they give feed to the animals. Yes, Ned. Yes, Ned. New. Sorry. Yes, new. You say increasing more frequent feeding here will affect reducing the feed intake, reducing the reducing the pH compared with only 2 times. The reason is because after we feed the ruminant with any kind of the diet, particularly in this case is the combination of forage and grain, the trend of the pH will be decrease, and then in the several hours later it will be increase. So this is another reasons why the more frequent feeding it will make more reducing on the pH.
It mean in the 4 time when we feeding 4 times, is the pH will decrease more than 2 times, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question. On page 28, you mentioned about the environment. Yes, in here, in summer, you tell like the actual digestibility will better than the winter. Could you explain, please? Thank you.
It can
28.
be say from the yes. It can be what we call. It can be explained at least from the 2 part. The first is digestibility in the summer is tend to higher in this case. The first is But it's summer. Oh yes, the first is if we consider about the quantity of the feed intake, the dry matter intake is less compared with the winter. Then the digestibility will be higher. Back to the first theory, any kind of the low feed intake will affect on the higher digestibility. And then another part is maybe also related the metabolic heat production from this animal is yaks during the summer or the high temperature. This kind of the animal will have a low metabolic heat production. Then it will also affect on the digestibility. I'm thinking like that way.
Yes, thank you.
Neil, can you understand?
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
But
Remember, don't.
Yeah. Yes, Professor.
Yes, you continue.
Yeah, but could you explain about the metabolic heat metabolic again? Sorry, as well. That you explained the another one.
Oh yes. So in the high temperature or in the summer situation, the animal will try to modify, not modify, try to make adaptation for himself or herself to convenient with this environment. So one of the way that they do is try to reduce the heat metabolic production from their body. So in this kind situation, when the metabolic heat production is low or reduced, then maybe it can increase help to digest. Will help to increase the digestibility.
Okay, thank you. Now I understand. Thank you.
Can we make it more simple? Can we make really more simple? That is high temperature always have reduced food intake, and reduced food intake always have a higher digestibility. That is a simple way, because I did this kind of environment temperature for last 50 years. I found that under the higher environment temperature, always have higher efficiency. They always have higher digestibility in all kind of animal. Okay, and then people will say, if they have higher digestibility, they have a higher efficiency, why they grow slowly? Because the total intake is reduced. Once the total intake is reduced, then of course the total nutrient intake also you are increase the digestibility, but the total nutrient intake still lower. Can we say like this way? It's more easy to understand.
Yes, Professor.
From all my experiments, I found that nobody believed me at the beginning. I said that the high temperature will have a higher efficiency. Nobody believed me because everyone said that high temperature is heat stress. Stress should be lower efficiency, but that is not true, because higher temperature lowers the food intake and then improves the efficiency, but because the total nutrient intake is still lower, so the total nutrient intake is lower, so their performance is still lower. Sorry. Can you accept as well?
Yes, Professor.
Yes. Neil, can you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, Professor.
What I'm saying? Could you repeat?
You said in the summer, the animal will decrease the feed intake. The feed intake will decrease because of it's like the environment is not the environment is not it's because the temperature is high, so decrease the feed intake. So if the feed intake decrease, the nutrient digestibility will increase because of the less than of amount of the feed, like that. Yes.
And then why the high temperature they will have a higher lower performance. They have a higher digestibility. They have a higher efficiency. Why they have a lower performance?
Pardon, Professor?
If they have a higher environment temperature, they will have a higher efficiency and higher digestibility. But why they have lower performance? Performance is weight gain.
Is this about the history like that? I'm not sure.
No.
Lower feed
It's
intake.
not totally between heat stress. It's because the Chet, what is that? Chet, you are
Less of the
smiling.
nutrient.
You must know the answer. Chet.
I would say the total feed intake is decreased, so the amount of energy they take will fulfill their maintenance energy. So for to gain the body weight, the energy is not enough. So body weight will not gain as much as like winter animals because they eat more, so they have higher energy for maintenance and plus the gain.
You know, I recently heard one of saying. This saying said, if you do not thinking about, and then you are easy to get the old man's syndrome. Just like me, old man syndrome is you are easy to forget something, you know. Sorry, I'm just a joke, but try please to think about high food intake, high temperature cause lower food intake. Lower food intake cause the higher efficiency of digestibility and also efficiency. But the total intake is lower. The total intake is decreased about 25% under the higher environment temperature. 25. But the feed efficiency only increased a little bit. So which one is important? Of course, food intake is important. Okay, so this is a sorry, Ned, I'm trying to let the student understand. Okay, so I'm so stubborn to ask them to try, because today I'm stay in the Great Wall factory for whole days. Okay, so I found that also have many people in Great Wall. They are all of them are graduated from the master degree course in Taiwan University, Zhongxin University, and our university. Yihong is there. Okay, some other people is there. But if they do not thinking about, and they always get the wrong logical, and the logical is become very important for us for master degree or PhD training. Okay, that's why I'm so stubborn to insist you have to understand this. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. I think all students will remember the graph about growth and development cost.
Yes.
Because even they have a high digestibility, they use all the nutrients for maintenance, is not for growth. Yes.
So in the next time, people ask you, say, why the animal in tropical or subtropical area cannot grow so fast? How do you answer this, Neil?
Because of sometimes the animal use the nutrient for maintain more than to produce the how to say the product.
In this case, you have to say because under heat stress. Under heat stress first. In tropical country. If we raise animal in in because New took this course. I was when she was master student here. You remember one course, the required course?
Yes,
Yes.
Professor. Yeah, in his trade, the animal will decrease the feed intake, so the nutrient that animal take it will need to maintain. It's not to
It's
produce the
nothing
product.
at the moment. It's nothing to do with maintenance.
Yeah.
You better to say reduce food intake, and reduce food intake usually reduce about 10 to 20%. But here the efficiency, low food intake increase efficiency only very small amount. Okay, 64 reduce minus 03 is only 61. 61 is only 1%. Okay, so efficiencies, of course, under the high environmental temperature, under the lower food intake is increased efficiency, but food intake usually reduce at least 10%, 20%. Okay, so we have to be very clearly understand this part.
But here for cold state, also the same trend, right? If animal under cold state.
Yes, cold stress they eat the same. High heat stress, lower stress. HI.
High intake and low intake.
And low intake. Yes. Okay. High intake still is lower. Okay. No matter it's dry matter or anything else. If you eat more, always have a lower efficiency. But nothing to do with the whole performance. Performance, you have to understand, performance is related with total nutrient intake. Sorry, I should not so stubborn to insist this, but if you do not understand this part, in the future you will always argue with other people about this. Because one of my students working in the industry, he always think my talking is wrong. Okay, why? He said efficiency is very important. Of course, efficiency is very important, but don't forget the food intake is number one. Sorry. So student always talking to me, say you should not so stubborn. I'm not so stubborn. I'm just try to let the people to understand. Any question? Susu?
My question is on the page 21. Here you mention about if we increase the digestibility of the starch by providing opportunity for the bacterial attachment for the starch. So can you, the final sentence.
Yeah.
So can you give some explanation on it? It will have some benefit on the ruminant bacteria or not?
Increase the various combination heat most of the time. Of creation combination grain species for grain species by application various combination heat most of the time and mechanical disposition. So in this second sentence, I'm thinking that this just want to explain that by providing the processing, whether in the heat moisture, I mean like the extruder, they make heating the raw material, it will affect on the, how to say, the increasing digestibility of the starch, because those particles of the starch will more, how to say, I just want to say related to this, how to say, yes, because those kind of the, if this kind of the starch, we break down this kind of the particle through those kind of processing, whether of the heating or the extruder, then it will more easy for bacteria attach those kind of particle in the rumen, then hopefully that will increase the, whether in the microbial protein synthesis or digestion. Is so am I answer your question, or I misleading your
So
information?
how about what's the related with the bacterial attachment?
So related with the bacteria attachment is the particle size. I mean the particle size through this processing, the particle size of the raw material when digest will be, what to say, more easy for bacteria to attach this kind of the feed processing, then more easy to break down, whether in more easy to break down to be how to say, to convert it become the FFA energy, and then to use it in form of the protein for the digestion.
Chou, do you agree?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Any other people? Do you agree? I suggest we should not thinking too complicated, because we go back to the last page. Yes, you can see here heat, moisture, time, and the mechanical action. What is the common things for this 4 treatment? Heat, moisture, time, and mechanical. What is the common things for this 4 treatment?
Extrusion.
No, it's heat, moisture, time, and mechanical action. They all have one common things. That makes the gland broken down, and so they have more surface area. Once they have more surface area, usually they will attach the bacteria. Bacteria are easy to attach, and then they become easy to digest. If we're thinking like that way, will be much better. Susu, do you agree with it? No.
So that means when the surface area of the feed is more bigger, so they have more surface to touch the bacteria, so the bacteria will be degrade more easily.
Yes.
Than before. Okay.
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who is Suping? Suping is
Suping is Chet.
Professor, me.
Chet, yes.
Related with this one, my question is, I was reading one book, and in that book, it said like, in goat and lamb, if we feed them the whole grain is better for the lamb and goat, not for the dairy cow, not for the cattle. So, is there any relation with this one, Professor?
even in the goat or sheep, usually for the whole grain is for the high pressed. After moisture, you will have a high pressed. And once you have high pressed, you are also increase the surface area. Okay. Anything increase the surface area will increase the digestibility. But the one thing is exception. Until now, I will ask Aswah. That is, what is the particle size of the grass? Small size grass have a lower digestibility. In your presentation, you always also mention about this. Why? I don't know. Because 周淑敏的先生周玉婷 's master degree thesis also find the same thing for grass. Why?
Can we say if the particle size of the grass is too fine, then how to say, the passage rates of this small particle will be more faster, then will not stay longer in the rumen?
Good, very good. Thank you. That's really, you know, I hope all the students can think about all these kind of things. It's not, for example, in this previous we've mentioned about the surface area, but here it means they pass through the lumen is more fast. Yeah. So different things, and you have to immediately thinking about different answer. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm a little bit crazy old man. Okay. Another me. You didn't ask a question.
Yes, I didn't ask question, but I have one question. Yes. Aswa, could you back to the slide 27?
27.
Yes, 27. Yes, for the table, I wondering why in the T group they had higher diameter intake, like very higher than the other group. Is this a common value or not?
Okay. Thank you, me. The T in this case is meant for the thermo-neutral environment and then free feeding. So so these animals stay in the zone is comfort, and then the feeding is free. So the feed intake, diameter intake here is higher. So this, you can say this is the normal situation, because the H is here is high temperature, and the TR here is thermoneutral, but restricted feeding, seems like that. TR. Yes, restricted feeding, yes. So the value in the T here for the diameter intake is high, yes.
Can I say something?
Yes, Professor.
Okay. This is a very, very good example of experiment. Okay. High temperature is one treatment. Thermoneutrality is another treatment. But the TR is mean even in the thermoneutrality, you still have the same feed intake as high temperature. Did you notice? The dry matter intake, this two is almost the same.
Yes.
Okay, so this is one kind of experiment method. That means whether the temperature will influence about this, or just because they have a food intake influence of this. Okay, so you can see the high temperature in this kind of situation, they will have a higher digestibility, dry matter digestibility. So the thermal restrict, they also have a higher digestibility. But the higher food intake in the thermal neutrality, they will have a lower. Okay, this kind of experiment design is really beautiful one. Okay, in the future you also can doing like this way, the same food intake, and then we can compare the high temperature and the low thermal neutrality temperatures. It's due to the temperature or due to the restricted feed intake. New, can you understand this?
Me, Professor.
New,
Yes, Professor.
because me is concentrate and new is not concentrate.
Now I'm looking at the table, Professor.
Jet, can you understand what I'm saying? This kind of design is a very clever one, you know, very clever one. Okay, I repeat again. High temperature is due to the high temperature, but high temperature always reduce food intake. For example, here, they only eat 477 grams of food. And the thermal neutrality, they usually is a low temperature. And the low temperature, they eat more. But if you compare these two, and the people will say, it's due to the high temperature or low temperature. And then we will say, why not? We have a lower temperature, but we call the same food intake as high temperature. Even in the thermal neutrality, we have the same intake as high temperature. Then, if their digestibility on the dry matter, okay, on the dry matter situation, they are the same at least. Okay, but their food intake more, they have lower digestibility. This kind of design is using in many of the nutrition experiment. Okay, so we better to understand this. 君真有没有问题
Professor,
？Yes.
yeah, for this one, in the thermoneutral temperature with restricted feeding, the dry matter intake is 421, right? It's the lowest dry matter intake. And also
not the lowest dry matter, the same dry matter intake as a high temperature.
High
421 compared with 477 is no difference.
Yeah, there is no significant difference. Yeah.
It's not only
But-
no significant, even I will say it's no big difference.
Okay.
Because if 477 minus 33 is 440 something, and 421 plus something about 27 is still the same.
But why, in case of the crude protein, NDF and ADF is the significantly reduced?
Yes. In this case, your question is very good. In this case, you have to try understand even the high temperature, their digestibility for the protein part, because they are lower food intake. Their protein part is still the highest one, but usually it's not due to the food intake. We said it's dry matter, and this one is a protein.
Professor,
Yes.
I was thinking like this, whether this is right or no. Related to the crude protein in high temperature is higher compared with those another two treatment. I was thinking that if we provide the concentrate and then the forage in the high temperature, connecting with the behavior seems like they will prefer to finish the concentrate, then can we say this is maybe another reason that during the feeding they more prefer to eat the concentrate because the concentrate has high energy and high protein, and they left the forage?
I don't know. You better to ask the author whether their food intake is different or not. Any other question? 云珍有没有问题？云珍 ，OK。Ned, do you have any question? I usually ask the most older people finally.
Okay, can you go to slide 11, please? Yes. From this table, can you please explain more about interaction between feeding frequency and microbiome? And the microbiome.
So from this table, we will see that by providing more frequent feeding or diet to the lambs in here, the microbial and then the microbial of the crude protein is tend to increase. I mean, increase here seems like because we give more frequent feeding in the small amount, and in the small amount, so activity of the bacteria inside the rumen will, in my imagination, is more, how to say, more active. Then he will have it will affect on the amount and then efficiency of microbial crude protein itself, because the feeding seems like always available during the time.
Okay. From here, what is the real practical that the feeding times and also how to feed them during summer or winter from your presentation?
For this is sorry, Ned. This is for the practical or from this?
I mean, today we get many information about
yes.
digestibility with feed, right? How to
Yes.
feed. Yes. So my another question, just want to know if we do practical work, what is the feeding times? What is good feeding time for your animal, and how to feed your animal under heat or cold state?
If you ask like that way, I will thinking like this way. I will choose whether I will feed my animal 2 times or 3 times. It's will relate it with how many costs and how many profit that I get if I have to feed them 3 times. Of course, I will not choose only 1 times feeding, but I will consider whether 2 times or 3 times feeding, because it's according to this to the paper said that by the 3 times feeding, the digestibility is better than 2 times, but I have to consider whether this will affect on my profitability or not, because 3 times feeding would mean also make the labor working, electrical, and then this kind of thing. So I need to calculate. But for the milk proposes, if this milk proposes for the cows, if this is dairy cows and then this is a high milk production, I will prefer to choose 3 times feeding rather than 2 times feeding.
But I remember have one question. If we increase the feed particle,
Yes.
also can improve digestibility, right?
Yes,
And
particle
if
size, yes.
I were you, maybe I will choose feeding 4 times and improve the feed quality by your information.
Yes, Nat, that is also another possibility. Combination between the feeding frequency and also particle size.
Still have a small question, because when the young ruminant, the digestibility is totally different with old ruminant. So how to feed them in that case?
Oh, for the young ruminant, because the rumen is not function yet, so in the common situation, the main feeding is from the milk, because that is more easy to absorb and digest in the abomasum, and during the time, whether we want to make a weaning on the according to the previous, what is it, according to the some reference, when we speak, I'm sorry, then we can choose whether we will what conclusion.
I think you have in some table that you
Yes.
provide the concentrate ratio higher in during the wean, right?
I'm sorry, I'm looking for the, yes, this one, content, yes, I just want to, yeah, I'm looking for this slide. I'm consider that so during the, right, so during the animal achieves a certain week of the period, and then we can decide to weaning whether in the according to this research is under 4 or under, or we can choose the 6 week. Then we can weaning this goat. I'm sorry, yes, this cow, if this is the calf.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question or comments? Because I can feel everyone is tired. Also, I am still not tired. But I can feel if you are thinking we still need to think about all this kind of thing, you know. Otherwise, you feed 2 times, 4 times, or 8 times. To be honest, I say at the moment, the cattle is, we feed the cattle is 2 real time, but another 2 time is a 4. We call the force feeding. Okay, that is just a pushback all these feeds. Which one is you the cow or the animal push forwards about the feeds, and then we push back all these kind of feeds, and then you can increase the performance a lot. So at the moment, even they using the mechanical way. Okay, this is mechanical way. I can show you in the future. They're using a mechanical way to push back. Okay, so this is also can consider as a one of the feeding. Why we need to feed more times? It's because you go back to the 4, 8 that table. You can see one thing very interesting. No, not this one.
11. I think 11.
And you can see, so after 4 times feeding, the microbes will be more stable. Okay, to be honest, I say the microbe will far more stable, because you always try to keep the lumens microbe and also the pH in the constant situation. If in the constant situation, their digestibility, their performance, their healthy is the best one. Okay, that's why we feed them more times. And of course, compare here 4 times and 8 times, they have no big difference. So why we needed to increase to 8 times? And to be very honest, I say almost every animal has more or less the same things. For example, layer chicken. Okay, one of my students, they feed the layer chicken 5 times, and then they found the egg quality will be highest in 5 times. Why? Because 5 times, just like this one is a lumen microbe will be constant, and 5 times of the layer chicken, they will let the calcium constant in the blood. And once the calcium constant in the blood, and then you will find that their egg shell quality will be very good. Okay, so the feeding times becomes very important. Nana, do you have any question?
No.
No.
Already many questions.
Okay, page 27. Sorry about that. I know it's already almost 9:30. Okay, people already asked. Page 15. Yes, people. Sue already maybe already asked the same question. You know, in this kind of situation, why the dry matter digestibility will be lower in fine mixture, the concentration with 10% ground hay.
Oh,
So it's fine one, because this is opposite of what we said before. You know, we said before is a particle size is after treatment, they always have a very big surface area. But this one, fine particle should be have small surface area. So large surface area. large surface area. So they should have a higher digestibility. Why?
As I mentioned, can we say this because if too fine, then the particle itself is more easy or more faster to pass the rumen than the passage rate.
Yes, very good question. Because I can see you already have a slow mind at the moment. You are really tired because we ask too many questions. So your face is already changed. My goodness. So, but you still consider the same way. But very good. Remember, never be fed up by other people. Okay, especially those kind of very stupid professor. I mean me. I'm not saying Ned. Ned is a clever one. Okay, so please, in the future, every student notice one thing. You have to be thinking about very clearly, even you are tired. Okay. Sorry, I speak too much. Actually, I'm very tired because of the whole day I'm outside, you know. I prepared last night and this early morning, my goodness. Nobody wants to say good night to me?
Good night, Professor.
Good night. Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Good night,
Yeah, thank you.
Professor.
Bye.
Good night.